Torch here. Alright, this is a Ford 3.8, and I have to change the water pump because it's leaking. So, first thing you want to do, jack her up, get you a bucket underneath there, pull off that bottom radiator hose, and empty out what's left. Then, you got to go and take out all the fan bolts, except for one, because you don't want that fan falling into your radiator, because it won't come out until you get this shroud cover off. So, I'm ready to take off the shroud cover. Got that. Put that in parts pan number 1. Finish getting my last bolt out of the fan. I thought I had it out more than that. Oh, there we go. Alright. Then carefully separate the fan and pull the fan and the shroud out together so you don't hit the radiator. Alright, got the fan and the shroud out of the way. You didn't really want to see me do that, but I had to put the camera down anyways, so you wouldn't have been able to see crap anyway. So, now, next thing, got to take off the serpentine belt. And to do that, got to put a wrench on the back side of one of these tensioner pulleys and pull it the other way and pop the belt off. And then take off the lower radiator hose and heater hoses, and then start working on the bolts for the pump. I got the belt off and the pulley that was on the water pump itself. And what I always do, pretty much no matter what, is buy a new serpentine belt. This one's cracked. Probably be alright for a while, but while you got it apart, you might as well change stuff that's going to wear out, because it's just going to be a problem in the future. So, got a new serpentine belt too. Okay, got my radiator hose off. Hoses, I should say. These are relatively new. I put them on not that long ago, so I'm going to save those. And they're relatively easy to change if they do leak. But what you really want to do while you're in here, get rid of them heater core hoses. Get new ones. While you got it all apart, it just makes sense. These are obviously the originals because I can see the Ford lettering on them. Just get rid of them. I mean, they're not leaking, but forget it. The other thing I would highly suggest is put in a new thermostat, which is right behind this. 2 bolts. Get that out, put in a new thermostat and gasket. Another problem you won't have to worry about in the future. Well, now I'm going to start taking off all these bolts for the water pump. Another quick thing, remember when I started the video I said pull off the lower hose to drain out the fluid? You can open up this little valve here and drain it that way, but it takes forever, and a lot of times those valves break or go bad, so I never try to mess with those. You know, I mean, yeah, this way is kind of messy. I did get some on the floor. You got some cleanup, but hey, you know, at least you don't have to get a whole new radiator because that stupid piece broke off. So it's worth it. So I always just yank off that hose. Alright, I got the bolts out. Another quick point I want to tell you. Of course, they don't want you doing this yourself, or some idiot engineers at Ford don't know what the hell they're doing, which is usually the case. So a lot of these bolts are different sizes. So just to let you know, you need a 1/2 inch, a 10 millimeter, a 14, and a 15 to get at those bolts. Idiots. I don't know why they can't just make them all the same size. It's so stupid. Okay, forgot about this, but I had to take off the alternator first and just set it back there, and then I had to take off the power steering pump because some idiots decided to put this bracket that holds the steering pump on here onto two bolts that hold the water pump on. So that was fun, especially getting a bolt back here with this bracket in the way. So I think when I put it together, I'm going to drill a hole in here enough to get a extension through there so I can get a socket back there and get that bolt back on without turning it a quarter turn at a time. That took forever. But all the rest I just power buzzed off with my air ratchet. So once you get those last two bolts out, you gotta remember this is the old one. Just take a hammer, knock on her, pry on a little bit with a screwdriver, and it should fall right off of there. You don't really care if you damage the old one. So, but just don't hit it real hard with a hammer. Oh, by the way, the bolts that hold that bracket on were 15 millimeters. Just in case. Trying to help. So you guys ain't digging around for 15 different sockets like I had to. Alright, now I got it off. Finally. Big fun. Now, what I always do, just because it's me, I always take the brand new one and I paint it. I'm going to paint it Ford engine blue because I like doing that. It looks nice. Plus, I get forgetful over the years and can't remember what parts I changed and stuff, and so then I know anything that's nice and painted up blue that, oh, I've changed that before. Even though I've been writing, pretty much keep a maintenance log on all my vehicles. But I just like them all nice and clean and pretty. Now comes the fun part. To take my scraper and go through here and clean up all the old gasket material. Got to get all that crap off. Then I'm going to take a mild wire brush to it and clean up all the surfaces. And then I'm going to take some carb cleaner and clean all of this crap up. Get rid of all of this garbage in here and just clean it up the best I can. It's a lot nicer working on it when you're putting it back together, when everything's clean and you don't have to worry about getting crap all over your hands. And you can see I got some grease buildup all over the place, so I might as well clean that stuff off while I have the opportunity. And even the thermostat hole, you know, I mean, that thing's all pretty nasty looking. Clean all of that up. Get it all nice and clean, and then you don't have problems down the road. I hate breaking down on the side of the road, so when I got stuff apart, I'll change unnecessary parts if I have to, if I find something original, you know, and just preventative maintenance, you know. I don't like screwing around. This car's 25 years old. It's in real good shape. I've had it almost all of its life. I've taken very good care of it, but, you know, when you get in a hurry and you do things fast and cheap and, you know, then you end up with problems. So I take my time and try to fix as much as possible when I'm doing a project and try to avoid future problems. Alright, now I'm ready for paint. If you do decide to paint, you know, make sure you tape up your hose ports there, and also you want to get that rubber seal. You really don't want to get paint on that rubber seal, you know, cause it to leak down the road or something. So otherwise, she's ready to go. See, now ain't that pretty? And then while I'm waiting for my paint to dry, I'm going to take all these kind of parts and stuff to my wire wheel, clean them up real nice. Even the nuts and bolts. Get them all nice and cleaned up so they go back in nice and easy and don't have to worry about getting my hands all dirty. Okay, cleaned up the thermostat housing and painted that too. Had a little rust on it. Figured what the heck, I might as well clean that up, paint it, slow down that rust from being a future problem. Why not? Now while that stuff is all drying, I'm going to go clean up all of my bolts on the wire wheel. And clean up the engine with the carb cleaner. Ooh, that'll be a big mess. Also, too, I forgot to mention this, after you take all this apart and everything, make sure you flush out your radiator with a garden hose and flush out your engine, flush everything out. Alright, I got all my nuts and bolts cleaned up while I was waiting for that paint to dry. Time to wash my hands and put it back together. See, this is one thing I like about working on my own stuff. You take it into a shop, they ain't going to take the time to clean all this stuff up. They don't really care. They're just going to slap it back together. Alright, I'm ready to put it on. Now, a lot of mechanics disagree with me on this part, but it's a Ford. Fords leak. So I always use gasket sealer on everything. Except head gaskets, of course, but always just a thin coat of gasket sealer, and it never will leak. Trust me, I know a lot of mechanics that disagree with me about that. They say it causes leaks, but in my experience, I've never had any of my Fords leaking after I've used gasket sealer on. Okay, just a real thin coat on both sides. I put it on the pump and on the engine. Real thin. I know it looks a little thick in places, but trust me, it's not. It's thin. Even if it is thick in a couple of spots, that stuff will ooze out. And of course, you will get a little extra, but just take a paper towel on your finger, wipe it off on the inside there, get that stuff cleaned up. So you don't really want that stuff inside your engine. But it'll pretty much be dry by the time you even go to start this thing, so I really wouldn't worry about it. I just want to get some of these big globs that oozed out. And I put the pump on. Okay, got it somewhat on. One important thing too, just like with putting on a tire or pretty much any car part, you want to tighten them bolts in a sequence. Don't tighten this one and then tighten this one. You want to, skip around. Do this one, do one on the bottom, come back, do this one, do one on the bottom. And right now I just have these snug because these still have to be put on with the bracket and stuff. So then I will go back and get them all again in sequence, one over here, one over here, one over here, one over here, because you don't want to take the chance of warping anything. You want it perfectly flat and tight. Alright, she's back on. Got all the bolts in, got them torqued to where they should be. I would tell you the torque setting, but I cannot remember because I took a long break. Anyway, now next I'm going to put the thermostat on in that tube that I painted black to clean it up. I always put that on now while I have room, because otherwise, once you put all this other stuff in the way, those two bolts are pretty hard to get at, so I find it best to put it on now. And same thing with this, little bit of gasket sealer, both sides of that gasket. Another thing I forgot to mention before I put the thermostat in is make sure you put the spring side in, because if you go the other way, it won't work, and then you're going to overheat, and you're going to have all kinds of trouble. So make sure spring side goes into the engine. One thing I forgot to mention too with these Ford 3.8s, you see how they got those little slots there? The original thermostat would go in there and kind of click like a gas cap, and the replacements don't. So what I always do is I'll put a little tiny bit of gasket sealer on there and get that baby to sit in there just perfectly center and let it dry before I put this on. Otherwise, it's a real bear to get that in there and all lined up. It's just, it's a pain in the butt. I don't know why they don't make the replacements with that little clip so you can just turn it, but they don't. So, and that's the only way I found around that is just, I've even put a little bit of glue, a little bit of super glue on there before on these 3.8s, just enough to hold it in place until you can get it bolted in there. But, pretty much I just been using a little bit of gasket sealer in the last few ones I've done. And it works good. That stuff dries up in about 10-15 minutes, so put a little bit of that there, it dries up enough to hold it, put it that way, till you can get the bolts in. Okay, see how I did that? Just a little bit in like 4 spots. And you put this baby in there, make sure the spring's going towards the engine. Luckily they got that little inset in there that'll help hold it center. It's just real hard to get it to stay in there where it's supposed to stay while you're trying to bolt it in. It's impossible, so I find it better to just kind of glue it on there. And one quick note, I don't normally do this. I'm not shilling for a company or anything, but I always buy my parts at Napa. Yeah, they cost a couple of bucks more, but you know what? I don't have problems. I go to some of the other big chains, yeah, it's a few dollars cheaper, but I'm telling you, I swear, the stuff, it just doesn't last as good as Napa's. And I've noticed too, you go to some of the other places, they'll sell you the water pump. The water pump's $3 cheaper than it is at Napa, but they don't include the gasket. This one includes the gasket. So sometimes you're paying the same price anyway, but I just do not have problems with Napa's parts. And when it comes to doing all this work on something like this, it's worth a few extra bucks. And any of you that watch my channel normally know I am a cheapskate. I do things as cheap as possible. But when it comes to something that has to last, I just swear by Napa. And the other place I don't skimp is on oil filters. I get the Napa Gold. I tell you what, I challenge you. Go buy any other oil filter than a Napa Gold, and when you're done with it, cut it open and look inside. And then cut one of these Napa Golds open and look inside. You will not believe the difference in quality. Alright, so I pretty much got everything back together except for the fan and the shroud and one of the hoses there. You'll notice I got this funnel here. This is going straight into one of the heater hose ports. This is so I can fill the block with water first. You want the block full of water, because if you just fill it up at the radiator, guess what? You don't have any water inside of the block. and the block is not going to get water until the thermostat opens up. So you want to make sure you have water in the block. I always fill it up after doing something like this with just straight water. Make sure I don't have any leaks, because if I have a leak and I got to take something apart, then there goes all that brand new antifreeze. So anyway, plus it's another good way to flush it out. So I just pretty much got that all filled up there. She's there. I'm going to put the rest back together and drive her outside and see what happens. The other thing too with filling it up from here, you usually don't have to bleed it out after it's running. You usually have to take off the cap and sit here and watch it bubble forever and try to get all the air out. This way, it's all going into the block, and it's coming up here. I can hear it gurgling, or at least it was right before I started the video, but it was gurgling for quite a while. So, and that's getting rid of most of the air inside of the block. So hopefully I'll probably bleed it a little bit once I do it all back together, but I won't have to do much, put it that way, instead of the usual long waiting and stuff pissing all over the place. Alright, anyway, enough of that. I'm going to get this back together. Alright, got it all back together. I'm going to pull it outside and let it run for a few minutes and warm up and see if anything's leaking. Alright, looks good. I don't see anything dripping. Looks like she was a success. Alright, well, I hope this video helped you out. Till next time, torch out.